double in Montreaux. It was due to be a memorable visit to Montreaux. This appearance was part of the Rose d'Or TV festival that was always held in the Swiss town, and in between our first and most recent visit, we hadn't appeared on television. My memories of both visits are misty bubbles suspended in alcohol like some ancient relic of a spectacular party. Montreux is a bit of a playboy playground for the rich and Swiss. When we arrived on our first visit, we got taken out on Lake Geneva to check out the amazing view. From the lake, you could see people hang gliding around the Alps on the shoreline. It was like the Truman Show. Everywhere was spotlessly clean. No litter, no graffiti anywhere. I've no memory of what we performed on our first visit, but a little research proves it to be Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. The after-show party is my only real memory, and that is quite hazy. I don't remember pulling the minibar off the wall to bring it closer to me, but apparently I did. What a lazy, destructive git. We were in a hotel suite, but I'm not sure whose room it was. We were all there, except Holly, and Simon Le Bon and John Taylor and Nick Rhodes are with us. There's a knock at the door, and a guy came in who was the spitting image of Robert Smith, and he was with Martin Gore, and they had a bottle of pear schnapps with them. This got passed around, and everyone was having a ceremonial nip from it. Eventually the bottle is empty and it's decided that the pear should be eaten. We disappeared into the bathroom and wrapped the bottle in a towel before cracking it open on the side of the bath. The pear is extracted and everyone has a bit. It was disgusting. It was like biting pure alcohol. It was pickled and rock hard. I chew it and swallow it and it goes down, but I know it won't be there for long. I wasn't the only one. No massive hail, just your stomach telling you it doesn't want it in there, so out it came. Our second visit happened on Saturday, the 10th of May 1986. This was an historic date for Frankie in some ways, but it would be a date that will be remembered more in the history books about Liverpool Football Club. We arrived in Montreux the day before the first ever meeting of Liverpool and Everton in an FA Cup final. Merseyside was united and travelling south for the big day out. The friendly derby was going to be the friendly final. We travelled further south to Switzerland to debut our new songs, but the lads were keen to keep an eye on events at Wembley that afternoon. Our friend Dave Roberts from Nike had decided to join us and was checked into the same hotel. He'd managed to blag a suite with a projector screen to watch the game. There was a rehearsal for the show in the early afternoon, but then the rest of the day would be ours. We arrived in Dave's suite and there were cases of cold beer and a huge screen, so we got stuck in. We only had to mime, so as long as we weren't plastered, things would be okay. David sorted out the big screen, but we couldn't get an English commentary, but eventually managed to get an Italian one with a decent picture. Mark and I were red, Peds was blue, and Dave was supporting Ian Rush because he was a Nike endorsee. Tony Pope was with us but remained neutral and was probably keeping an eye on our ale intake rather than the football. Would this be a good opportunity for me to introduce football into these pages for the first time and talk a little about my memories of watching the Reds? Do you mind? It won't take long, but I can't write this book without LFC getting a mention. If you don't like footy, then skip to the part that begins EI Adio we won the cup and you'll be whisked straight back to Montreaux. I can't remember the first game I went to, but the opposition wore red stripes, so probably Sheffield United or Stoke. It would have been pre-1971 because I was attached to Liverpool by then. I remember being close to tears in front of the telly looking at that long-haired twat Charlie George stretched out in the Wembley sunshine. I'd have to wait until we beat Newcastle in '74 before I saw Liverpool lift a trophy. My dad took me into town to see Shankly and his team bring it home, and we shared this final triumph for Liverpool. By 1976-77 season, I was going to most home games with my dad in the Anfield Road end, and sometimes with my cousins, but it would be March of that same season before I got to experience the Kop for the first time. I remember the excitement walking to the ground was a little bit more electric than usual. Walking to Anfield for a night game was special when you were a teenager. The crowd's density increasing as you neared the ground, the light shining from the floodlights on the stands, the smell of hot dogs and onions. They're all cliches, but they are because they are true. Whenever I kick my way through fallen autumn leaves, it always reminds me of walking along the tree-lined Utting Avenue. The buzz of emerging from the bleak fluorescent light under the stand to see the vast green carpet lit from above. When French champion Saint-Étienne turned up at Anfield, a goal to the good from the first leg, they brought hordes of fans with them too. Half of the Anfield Road was green, so we had to go on the Kop. The noise was tremendous, and to be part of that swaying mass for the first time was very special. It would be the only time I ever stood on the Kop. It would also go down in history of one of those amazing European nights at Anfield. Keegan scored right at the start and wiped out their goal advantage, and no doubt wiped a few smiles from French faces. After half-time, they were smiling again when they pulled one back, leading to cries of "Allez les Verts" from behind the goal. Ray Kennedy puts us back in front, but we need one more to go through. Enter Mr. Fairclough. A ball gets punted over the top and he's onto it. 3 touches later, it's in the net and I've gone flying off the barrier I was sitting on. Absolute mayhem ensued. I've never seen anything like it. We're in the semis and "We Shall Not Be Moved" is ringing out all over the Kop and the rest of the ground. My first experience of mass jubilation on such a grand scale. I didn't see anything after the ball hit the net, but I didn't care. I knew what had just happened was very special. Thanks, Dad. We rinsed FC Zurich in both legs of the semi. I went to that game as well, but that would be the end of my European adventure for that season. The final was in Rome and I was in school, so I'd be watching on telly with everyone else that wasn't begging, stealing or borrowing their way to Stadio Olimpico. Liverpool won the European Cup, but I wasn't there to see it. I'd have to wait until next year. King Kevin left and we got King Kenny, and I'd be there to see him dink the ball over the keeper and skip over the advertising hoardings to the Red Army at Wembley Stadium the following year. I'd never seen so many people dressed in red. Of the 100,000 in the ground, there must have been 90,000 Liverpool fans, and when Kenny scored, the whole ground shook. Half of my excitement at the goal was diminished when I could feel the terracing beneath my feet moving. I was quite scared and not keen to be bouncing up and down singing "We Shall Not Be Moved." When I got involved with playing music, my interest waned a bit despite the fact that Liverpool were wiping the floor with everyone during that period. When Frankie came along, it was all consuming and football was the last thing on my mind. My cousin Ted was on Liverpool's books at the time and he organised a trip to Melwood for Mark and I during the trip back home. We went along and got to see the team train and hung out with Craig Johnson for the afternoon. I was in the studio with Craig when they were recording the Anfield rap some years later. He invited Steve Proctor and I down there with the intention of us getting to record John Aldridge and Steve McMahon's parts on the record. He wasn't happy with what they'd done, but I didn't really fancy pretending to be Mac or Aldo. It was during my visit that broadcasting legend Brian Moore turned up to do his voiceover on the track. He was sitting on the sofa next to me waiting to do his bit, and it was great to have a chat with him for 10 minutes. Hearing the voice of World of Sport answering my questions was surreal. What a lovely gentleman he was, and I feel privileged to have met him. I would take in the odd game here and there, but I think it's hard to follow music and football at the same time. They're both all-consuming passions, and to split the passion would surely dilute it. I started to go back during the Evans and Julia years and took over my dad's season ticket. My fellow Red Andy Sherrick and I would share the home games between us, and I combined it with visiting my parents and my mother-in-law Joan. Like most season tickets, it wasn't in my dad's name, and the guy who owned it reclaimed it after Istanbul. It was pretty gutting because it was a fantastic seat. I'm fortunate enough to know enough Reds to put feelers out for tickets for me when I'm in Liverpool and there's a match on. In my lifetime of supporting Liverpool, I've seen them win every trophy there is to be won. If Liverpool become an ordinary team and never win anything again, then at least I've witnessed some of the club's finest moments, and a few low ones. I saw us lose to Wimbledon in the FA Cup final. I saw them lift several league titles at Anfield, a European Cup at Wembley, 2 League Cups, one in Wembley, one in Cardiff, and managed to get a ticket for the Chelsea Ghost Goal Champions League semi-final at Anfield. That is more than almost every football fan will ever see, so I can't be greedy. I still love the game and I still love Liverpool, but I'm falling out of love with it. I will go and watch a game anywhere, even Everton, and I love the experience of attending a live match, but the whole thing's become a bit sterile. The American owners debacle and the shabby treatment of Rafael Benitez disgusted me. The subsequent appointment of Uncle Roy was enough to suspend my interest for the season. I was in Liverpool twice during Roy's reign, and I could have gone to see them play and I declined. That had never happened before. If I was home and there was a game, I would go, but the shambles of the ownership struggle and the airing of dirty laundry left a bad taste in my mouth. If it wasn't for the social aspect of meeting a few mates for a beer before and after, I don't think I'd bother, and sitting in the pub watching is not the same experience as being there. I'm back in the fold again and watching again, but something was lost during that season off, and I'm not sure it'll ever come back. I'm finding it hard to get excited about it. I can see a point in the not too distant future where the Premier League will be like Formula One and countries will bid to hold games. We'll have the Merseyside derby live from La Bombonera in Buenos Aires. It sounds laughable now, but who'll stop the money men from doing it? The product is popular all over the world, more so than the ridiculously named Champions League, and I can see the breakaway happening. Anyway, let's get back to a time where footy was great. We're all plotted up in Dave's room with cold beers in hand and Abide With Me ringing in our ears. Everton strike first. Lineker. Ped's smiling, and he's still smiling at half time, but we've got Ian Rush. Mulby spots him, slides through a pass. Rush beat Bobby Mims to it and took it round him before slotting it into the net. Craig Johnson has gone sliding in after the ball just to make sure. Mark and I jump up and are in Ped's face. Dave Roberts is more concerned that Craig is trying to claim the goal. That was a Nike boot that scored that fucking goal, you Aussie bastard. Nobody could dispute Craig's second goal that came about 5 minutes later. In the last 10 minutes, Everton are trying to get back into the game and become stretched. A sublime pass from Mulby finds Ronnie Whelan. Whelan attacks and looks up and sees the Blues' nemesis ghost in at the far post and drops the ball into his path. Rush hits it. The camera in the goal is knocked over and so is Everton's cup dream. Mark and I are singing and drinking. Ped's gutted but still drinking. And Dave Roberts is delighted that a Nike boot has scored the winner in the final. League and Cup double. The party can start in earnest. Adio, we won the cup. We head over to the venue and carry on drinking. Although we've been on it all afternoon, we're still in good enough shape to mime. We're hanging about backstage and mingling with the other bands. I would meet someone that day that would become a really good mate, but the lager intake meant that I don't remember the meeting as much as he does. Tony Kiley was the drummer in the Blow Monkeys, and I was chatting to him and singing the Dr. Robert backstage, but more about TK later. There were so many other big bands appearing that we were thinking how we could upstage them, and this is when the idea of trashing the stage came up. Holly claimed it was his idea, but it wasn't. In the backstage area, I was introduced to a guy called Gary Levinson, who made Levinson guitars. He was selling me about their custom guitars and how they could make one specifically catered to me needs. He wanted to give me a guitar to use during the show, but I'd already been provided with one by Washburn. I had an endorsement deal with them, and they'd send a guitar to the TV studio of any country we were appearing in. This was convenient and meant not having to carry stuff with you. Mark used to end up using Washburn basses too most of the time for the same convenience. But at Montreaux, he took up Mr. Levinson's offer and decided to use one of his expensive bass guitars for the filming. Bad move, Gary. We were the last band on and our time was approaching, so we were ushered backstage where Noel Edmonds was having a few words with each band before they go on. It starts off tame enough, and then Ped starts taking the piss out of one of his prized sports cars. I think Noel had an AC Cobra and Ped was saying it was a kit car and not a genuine AC, but Noel didn't find it funny. We were being a little rude and dismissive of the diminutive chap, but nothing too over the top. Who'd have thought that the man who brought us Mr. Blobby would have such little humour? This first version of Rage Hard had a really long drum intro. We'd used this on the demo recording and it was tagged on the front for this TV mix to build up a little tension. I'm glad I didn't have to count the bars before miming the intro snare fill and fucking up my camera cue. The place is rammed and the audience are up for it. There are several Frankie scarves being waved in the crowd and we deliver a good performance, underwritten a little by the amount of alcohol we'd drunk. Rage Hard seems to go well and we start Warriors. We decided that as soon as the guitar solo kicked in at the end, then we'd start smashing the gear. The solo starts and I mime the first two bars before taking my guitar off and launching it into one of the Marshall stacks behind me. Ped's kit's already gone over and he pushes another stack over. Mark starts work on the Levinson bass. It was constructed well because he hit the floor 3 times with it before the neck eventually detached from the body. He really got caught up in the moment because in the minute following the end of the song, when we were taking our bows, he was still trying to break the neck across the bass drum on the floor. The show went out live, so when the destruction started, the director was in chaos and didn't know what camera to pick. This meant the whole thing looked even more chaotic. It was a triumph. We'd come back with a bang and everyone in our entourage was buzzing. Tony has watched the performance on the TV monitor and told us how great it looked. One person was not impressed. As we left the stage and were ushered out the building, I could see an irate Gary Levinson out the corner of my eye screaming at Mark, "You fucking asshole! That was a $1,500 bass! I'll sue you, motherfucker!" Mark didn't even look at him. After the show, we ended up going to a party on a boat hosted by Queen. I don't remember that much about it apart from having a couple of brief words with Brian May and shaking Freddie's hand. When we arrived home, we saw the bullshit headlines that had been written by the tabloids. No mention of the songs or the performance, just the cost of the damage. It was estimated the bill was 20 grand. There wasn't even 10 grand's worth of gear on the stage. Never let the truth get in the way of a headline. We travelled to Liverpool to play the same 2 tracks a couple of months later. The new Brighton rock show had been so successful that Granada decided to make another one called Rock Around the Dock. The stage was suspended across the Albert Dock and we were joined on it by artists like Run DMC, UB40 and Chaka Khan to name a few. We emerged from the O of a huge imitation Hollywood sign that went right across the back of the big stage. I think we were benefiting from a bit of local favour as we had fireworks and smoke bombs and the whole thing looked great. We ended the performance at the end of a long walkway rocking to Warriors. The largely home audience went mental. We flew back to London and waited for the rest of the album to be declared finished.